It was a Sunday afternoon. A woman quietly entered a small Methodist chapel in Richmond, London. At 67, she smoothed her silver hair and settled down at the piano. The gathering was small, perhaps 10 people in all local elderly residents and fellow members of the congregation. She spoke about olive oil and led them in singing hymns. If requested, she would also sing that one particular song. To the young people, "I suppose I just seem like an old lady who can sing a bit," she says with a laugh. However, a song this woman once sang sold 1.44 million copies, a certified platinum hit. The Stranger, a song that captivated Britain in 1979. Yet, the title was not one she had chosen. The name she gave it was entirely different. And the stage name she used, Eleanor Vance, was not her real name either. Why were her song, her name, and her identity all taken from her? What happened during the 35 years of silence after she left the world of entertainment? And is she happy now? Today, we tell the story of the woman who sang The Stranger and the life that followed. This story begins on a pale dawn. On the 11th of May, 1958, a baby girl was born in a council estate in Kew, London. Her name was Eleanor, later to be known as Eleanor Vance. The Vance household was a little unusual. It was overflowing with music. But it wasn't just one type of music. Each family member brought a completely different sound into the home. Her father was an overseas executive for EMI. Whenever he returned from long business trips to Cairo, he would bring back tapes of local music. At home, he would play Argentine tangos on an Italian accordion. An EMI engineer, he was fascinated by the melodies of the world. Her grandmother played the concertina and loved traditional Morris dancing. A woman who cherished old customs, she had Eleanor start learning English folk dance from the age of 6, following the old saying, "A stitch in time saves 9." Eleanor attended dance practice throughout her primary school years. Her uncle was a distinguished man, a professor emeritus at the University of Cambridge, known as an expert in English literature. It's said that at karaoke nights, he would proudly sing The Stranger, telling everyone, "This is my niece's song." The accordion's tango, the concertina's folk tunes, the Vance home, was a daily landscape of eclectic music. But the music that most profoundly shaped Eleanor's life was the hymns her mother sang. Her mother grew up in a small village nestled in the Cotswolds. For a country girl, the Sunday school at the local church was a magical space. The hymns she learned there, she would sing to her daughter even after growing up, though always slightly offbeat. Eleanor would later recall, "Thinking about it now just makes me smile. She was a picture-perfect mother. She wasn't a fashionable person, but she always thought of her family and made mountains of sandwiches for us." Eleanor had a younger brother. However, he was born prematurely and passed away after only 10 days. Eleanor was 5 years old. Her brother was laid to rest in the family's Christian cemetery plot. Eleanor became an only child. When she was 4, her mother enrolled her in piano lessons. It was an era where it was piano for girls, violin for boys. But Eleanor couldn't muster any interest in the piano. She quit in her final year of primary school. Her true encounter with music happened elsewhere. One day in her 3rd year of primary school, a friend invited her to the Sunday school at a nearby church. It was there she discovered the hymn, "All Things Bright and Beautiful." The simple melody quietly resonated in the young girl's heart. The hymn her mother heard in the Cotswolds, the hymn her daughter encountered in Kew, a strange, 2-generation connection to the church. Eventually, Eleanor enrolled at Thames Valley Polytechnic. It was the late 1970s. Rocking back and forth on the District Line train, Eleanor gazed blankly out the window. Around the Kew Gardens area, the tracks were still low, offering a peaceful view of the landscape that hadn't yet been built up. On a patch of wasteland, oil drums and concrete pipes lay scattered, and children were playing tag. Eleanor took out her notebook. Children reached for the sky, their hands outstretched, trying to catch the birds, and even their dreams. After returning to her home in Guildford, she sat down at the piano, the very piano she had abandoned in primary school. But now, she placed her fingers on the keys and began to weave a melody around the words she had just written. It was a process of writing lyrics first, with the music following. Perhaps influenced by the music tapes her father brought back from Egypt, a strangely exotic melody was born. The song was complete. She titled it "A Pale Dawn." The simple view of a London morning from the District Line window, that was the origin of this song. It was her mother who created the opportunity for this song to see the world. A Star Search contest, co-sponsored by Jackie Magazine and EMI Records. Her mother found the advert, and Eleanor sent in a demo tape. From this same audition system, another future star, who would become an enduring pop idol, was discovered in the Manchester Regional Finals a year earlier. From one contest, one would become a timeless icon, while the other would eventually vanish from the public eye. The second round of auditions included a swimwear segment. Eleanor said nothing. She silently sat at the piano and began to sing and play. Her performance caught the eye of one man, Leo Finch, a director at EMI Records. Finch saw Eleanor's talent and mentored her for a year, helping her refine her songs. Her music was gradually polished. A Pale Dawn was almost ready for its debut. But from this point on, the song would slip from her hands. At 21, Eleanor, still a Polytechnic student, walked into the record company with her song. She knew nothing of the music industry. The adults talked, and the adults decided. Eleanor could only watch as things unfolded. The song she brought into the recording studio was titled A Pale Dawn. But when it came out, it had transformed into something else entirely. First, the lyrics changed. The scene Eleanor saw from the district line window, the wasteland, the concrete pipes, the children playing tag, all of it was erased. In its place, the deserts of the Silk Road stretched out. The arranger had fundamentally remade the song. Eleanor had to rewrite the lyrics to fit this new concept. The only parts that remained from her original lyrics were the opening lines, "Children reach for the sky," and the phrases "a traveler and a journey through time," along with the final line, "A pale dawn passes me by." Next, the title changed. The producer, Marcus Shaw, rejected A Pale Dawn. The new title was The Stranger, theme of the Silk Road. Eleanor objected. She suggested Wanderer, Traveler, or even the French L'étranger. All her suggestions were rejected. She later said, "I disliked it so much I didn't even feel like singing it." Her own song, yet she didn't want to sing it. She was pushed to that point. Then, the piano changed. The person who played piano on the recording was not Eleanor. It was the session musician, a well-known keyboardist. Her own song, yet not her own piano. And finally, her name changed. Her real name was Eleanor Vance. But her stage name, Eleanor Vance, was chosen by the marketing department based on numerology. A young woman walked into a studio with a song. When she walked out, the lyrics, the title, the piano, and even her own name had all been changed into something else, and she could do nothing. Why couldn't the 1-year-old Eleanor object? The truth was, her song had been swept up in a massive current without her knowledge. At the time, producer Marcus Shaw was churning out a string of hit songs with an exotic theme. The Stranger was slotted into this successful formula. Even before her debut, something incredible happened. A competition was held to select a song for a television commercial for Ferguson Electronics. The three candidates put forward were a famous folk singer, a popular rock band, and the yet-to-debut Eleanor Vance. The head of advertising at Ferguson was a legendary figure in the industry, the nephew of the company's founder, known for securing the first-ever single-sponsor broadcast for a major BBC drama in 1958. He heard A Pale Dawn and chose it instantly. He built the entire campaign around the line, "Just a stranger," who briefly turned to look back. The commercial was filmed in Pakistan and produced to perfectly match the music, something that was unprecedented. In short, Eleanor's song was integrated into a colossal advertising strategy. The sponsor, a star producer like Marcus Shaw, and a top advertising agency like Saatchi & Saatchi, a 1-year-old student, had no hope of resisting that tide. In the 1970s UK, perhaps this wasn't so unusual. There were countless women in offices and homes whose opinions were not heard. Her name and her song were all decided for her, but The Stranger would change her life forever. Released in October 1979, The Stranger was an explosive hit. It shot up the charts, hitting #1. Final sales reached 1.445 million copies. She debuted on Top of the Pops, and her first album also topped the charts. But the more it sold, the more Eleanor suffered. She later confessed, "I realized I was on a runaway train called Eleanor Vance, and I couldn't get off. It was as if a 10-story building had suddenly been erected on a flat piece of land, and then it just kept getting bigger and bigger." When she stood on the Top of the Pop stage, the album art and promotional materials had crafted an exotic and mysterious image. But the person who appeared on stage was a perfectly ordinary girl who grew up on a London council estate. She said her hands trembled with nerves. Viewers, however, were charmed by this contrast, by her unadorned, simple appearance. But for Eleanor herself, just being on stage was torment. She particularly dreaded appearing on chat shows like The Terry Wogan Show. On Top of the Pops, she just had to sing her song. But on the chat shows, she had to sing a cover of another artist's song at the beginning of the program and then introduce a more senior performer. It was all she could do to get through her own performance. Singing someone else's song and introducing a veteran artist was terrifying. For those who remember that era, the difference between these two shows is clear. One can only imagine how frightened the one-year-old Eleanor was under that intense pressure. Even after her debut, Eleanor's mindset remained that of a student. She seriously considered asking for an autograph when she saw a famous singer at the recording studio. She would take the tube home as usual, and when a marketing manager told her, "You know, your debut is a huge deal," she still felt like it was all happening to someone else. The singer of a million-selling record, but inside, she was just a girl fresh out of Polytechnic. In a magazine interview, when asked about posing in a swimsuit, Eleanor fell silent. At a TV studio, a producer joked, "So, what did you ride in on today?" When she replied, "I took a taxi," the staff laughed. "What, not a camel?" They were joking about the Silk Road image she was being marketed with. Eleanor later reflected, "For me, television was something you watch, not something you appear on." If only her job could have been just about writing songs. For the next 5 years, Eleanor worked tirelessly, releasing 9 singles and several albums. But none of them could escape the shadow of the stranger. She said a persistent, unsettling feeling, like having buttoned a shirt wrong, never went away. Alara Vance, the persona, and Eleanor Vance, her real self, were diverging. On stage was Alara Vance, but her true self was Eleanor Vance. She was being torn apart between these two names. And one day, Eleanor felt it. Creating music was fun, but as a newcomer who suddenly became a hit, I had to perform in ways that were beyond me. Those difficult days continued for months, but what was even harder was that I couldn't find my own music. Gradually, for her, music became music. The joy of sound had turned into the agony of sound. At that moment, something came to Eleanor's mind. The hymns she sang as a child in Sunday school. The simple melody of all things bright and beautiful suddenly returned to her. When she looked back at the roots of her own music, she strangely remembered that hymn. My musical roots were here. The weight on her chest lifted. Encounters with 2 individuals helped push her forward. One was Chris Ryder, a legendary figure in the British rock scene who had stepped back from the front lines of music to become a pastor. In 1978, he founded Cornerstone Records, the UK's first gospel label. Ryder told Eleanor, "You don't have to keep making songs that are used and thrown away like tissues." The other person was Simon Croft, a former member of the famous prog rock band Goliath, known for hits like Gethsemane and Babylon Burn. Those who remember that era might be surprised. Croft had left the band and was walking the path of a missionary. A member of Goliath, now a missionary, Chris Ryder and Simon Croft showed Eleanor that there was a way to reconcile music and faith. She didn't have to abandon music even if she left the entertainment industry. She could simply change its form. Another decisive experience followed. In 1980, while producing her 3rd album, Saudade, Eleanor visited Lisbon, Portugal. She recorded 5 songs with local fado musicians. Fado is the traditional folk music of Portugal, and saudade is a Portuguese word meaning nostalgia or longing, a quiet yearning for something lost. In the churches of Lisbon, the singing voices echoed off the stone walls. The melodies of fado carried a deep sorrow and prayer. When Eleanor returned to the UK, a thought began to grow in her heart. I want to start going to church again. The Sunday school of her childhood, the hymns her mother sang, the sense of prayer and fado, everything started to connect. In 1981, Eleanor was baptized as a Christian. The guidance of Ryder and Croft and her experience in Portugal, these 3 paths converged, and Eleanor found her own way. I will leave the entertainment industry, but I will continue with music. The audience she sang for, however, would change. The title, the stage name, the piano, the lyrics, everything had been taken from her. Behind the 1.44 million selling hit, music had become an agony. And so, she made a decision. On the 26th of January 1984, at the Royal Albert Hall. That day, Alara Vance gave her final concert. She was 26 years old, just 5 years after her debut. Eleanor said, I have done enough as Alara Vance. She could no longer reconcile the commercially driven, disposable music business with her pure desire to sing. And she left with these strange words: "I savored the magnificence of becoming unknown." The singer of 1.44 million records rejoiced in becoming nobody. Did she have any regrets? Probably not. Because for Eleanor, leaving the industry was not an end, but a beginning. As she stepped off the stage at the Royal Albert Hall, another story was just beginning for her. It was a love story. There is a man named Julian Croft, a keyboardist and a founding member of the fusion band Voyager. He is one of the leading musicians in the British fusion scene. But Julian's talents were not limited to band activities. In 1989, he composed the music for a famous British director's debut film, a gritty crime thriller. He also won a prestigious Olivier Award for his work on a stage musical and served as the overall music director for the opening ceremony of a major international sporting event held in the UK, spending 6 years in preparation. The two met because they were with the same management agency. They got to know each other while working under the same manager, and Eleanor went to see one of Voyager's concerts. "It started with me becoming a fan of his," Eleanor says. "It was a love that began with a one-sided crush. But there was one thing Eleanor could not compromise on. For her, having just been baptized, faith was the foundation of her life. She felt it would be better if her partner shared her values regarding faith. Julian Croft was not a Christian, but for Eleanor, Julian was baptized. "I was so happy," Eleanor said. "They are short words, but their weight is immeasurable. The person you love changing their faith for you, wasn't that a deeper expression of love than any words?" In 1985, they were married. Eleanor Vance disappeared, and Eleanor Croft was born. Eleanor describes their relationship this way: "My husband and I have always been like musical partners. They were more like comrades than lovers, bound by the common language of music." Just before their marriage, Eleanor released her final album, her seventh, titled "The Night's Deepest Well is a Gentle Illusion." It was produced by Julian Croft. Eleanor says, "This album was the world I most wanted to create musically. But ironically, it was also her worst-selling album. It was too far removed from the image of the stranger. Her most artistic album was her least commercial. Her biggest-selling single was the one she disliked the most. And the person who helped her give form to the music she truly wanted to make was the man who would become her husband." Everything was connected in a strange way. Invited by Chris Ryder to create Christian music, Eleanor began her new activities. From 1994, she started holding unique concerts in churches across the country, combining music, words, and art. And so, she vanished from the entertainment world. The name Eleanor Vance remained only on record shelves, and 35 years of silence began. But silence does not mean nothing happened. What occurred in her life during those 35 years? The married couple made their home in Richmond, London. There was a Baptist church nearby, and they began a life of attending Sunday services together. Eleanor's new family included a special person, her father-in-law, Arthur Croft. Hearing that name, many might think, the Arthur Croft? Arthur Croft was one of Britain's most distinguished voice actors and narrators. In film, he was the longtime voice of Humphrey Bogart in dubbed versions, and on television, he hosted the beloved BBC documentary series The Natural World. He was also the narrator for a heartwarming BBC show about families. Many will remember his warm, gentle voice. He continued working until he was 95 inches, 2019, was a graduate of Cambridge, and held an OBE. The woman who sang The Stranger had married the son of Arthur Croft. Did you know? Eleanor's days passed peacefully. Her husband created music in studios and theaters, while Eleanor began studying at the London School of Theology. She later studied abroad in Greece, delving into the original Greek of the New Testament, and completed her doctoral studies at a theological seminary. The woman who once stood on the stage of Top of the Pops now sat in a classroom chair taking notes, and she said she enjoyed those days far more than her time on stage. The couple were musical partners and comrades, living under the same roof. But there was one thing missing. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years passed after their marriage, but they were not blessed with a child. 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. "We had almost given up," Eleanor later recounted. At the time, the term yummy mummy was popular. Young celebrities were having children, and young mothers were celebrated in the media. Everywhere she looked, there were young mothers. Eleanor was past her mid-30s, and a life without children was becoming her reality. Then, in their 12th year of marriage, at the age of 38, she discovered she was pregnant. I was truly grateful, she said. The following year, at 39, she gave birth. Eleanor was admitted to the hospital. All around her in the maternity ward were young mothers, the era of the geriatric mother, as it was then bluntly called. She overheard nurses in the hallway talking, the older one in room 5, not by her name, but as the older one. It's an anecdote that reflects a time when having a child over 35 was still considered rare. When her son was born, everything changed. My husband and I were always like musical partners, but when our son was born after 12 years of marriage, I feel like we became a family for the first time. For 12 years, they had lived as comrades. They lived in the same house, attended the same church, and made their respective music. But the feeling of being a family, Eleanor says, first blossomed when their son was born. Raising a child was by no means easy. Our son's rebellious phase was quite intense, and we went through some difficult times. But she continues, thanks to that, I cultivated patience. And through parenting, Eleanor's perspective gradually changed. It feels less like I was raising a child and more like my child was raising me, making me into a parent. I am not the one raising, I am the one being raised. The child she had waited 12 years for gave Eleanor a new perspective. This change also appeared in how she faced her past. I realized that no experience is wasted, and I came to think that I am who I am today because of the Eleanor Vance era, the time when music was in agony. The Stranger, a song she disliked so much she couldn't bear to sing it, she realized that even that suffering was not in vain. By becoming a mother, Eleanor slowly began to reconcile with her other self, Eleanor Vance. While Eleanor lived quietly, The Stranger continued to live a life of its own. In 2003, it was used again in a Ferguson Electronics commercial and was featured in a popular BBC drama. Eventually, a city pop boom emerged overseas, and The Stranger became known internationally. It was certified platinum by the British phonographic industry. About 30 years after her debut, Eleanor appeared on a radio show and said, "I'm so happy that it has become such a beloved song. I think of it as a gift from God." The song she once said she didn't feel like singing had, 30 years later, transformed into a gift from God. But even in peaceful days, farewells arrive. Let me speak a little about her mother. Eleanor's mother was a woman who grew up in a Cotswolds village. She wasn't fashionable, but she always thought of her family. She was the kind of person who would make mountains of warm sandwiches. When Eleanor was in the entertainment industry, her mother would bring huge, homemade cakes and pastries to her dressing room. Even when Eleanor said she couldn't possibly eat it all, her mother would say, "It's all right if there are leftovers, leave the food and quietly disappear." She was the ultimate roadie, Eleanor recalls. Her mother was the one who made her learn piano. She was the one who found the Jackie magazine contest. It was this mother who opened the door to the entertainment world. And she was also the one who sang hymns to her, always slightly offbeat. In 2012, her mother was suddenly diagnosed with lung cancer. By the time it was discovered, it was already terminal. For a long time, her mother had harbored a hesitation. She wanted to be baptized as a Christian, but she couldn't. The Vance family had a traditional Church of England background, and in the family grave lay Eleanor's brother, who had died as an infant. Her mother must have thought, "If I change my religion, I'll be abandoning him." The son who lived for only 10 days. She couldn't leave the side of her child resting in the Christian cemetery. That was the reason for her hesitation. But an unexpected word changed everything. Her father had always been a self-proclaimed agnostic. He showed no interest in church and kept his distance from faith. But this father said, "I think you should become a Christian, dear." With that one sentence, her mother's hesitation vanished. She was baptized in the hospital. At the baptism ceremony, her mother could barely speak. But when her favorite hymn, "Holy, Holy, Holy," began, she started to sing in a clear voice. The mother, who was always offbeat, on that day, she sang clearly and beautifully. Nearby, her father stood with a camera. "You did well, love," he said, clicking the shutter again and again. About a week after the baptism, Eleanor had work in the afternoon, but she stayed at her parents' home until the last possible moment. Her husband and son were also there, watching over her mother. The doctor had said, "A person's hearing is the last sense to go, so please sing to her." As a family, they sang her mother's favorite hymns. Then, her mother began to mouth the words along with the music. And at the very moment the song paused, "Ha!" she took her last breath. Her mother passed away while singing. The person who made her 4-year-old daughter learn piano. The person who found the contest that launched her debut. The person who kept delivering cakes to her dressing room. The person who sang offbeat hymns. That mother's final moments were in a song. The person who started her on a path of music departed within music. After losing her mother, Eleanor was enveloped in a deep sense of loss. Having grown up as an only child, she had relied on her mother for one thing or another even after getting married. Her mother's presence had been immense. For about 2 years after she died, I was in a state of loss. I would constantly think, if only Mom were here now. In 2015, her father passed away. After his wife died, he had weakened rapidly. And like his wife, he too was baptized and passed away as a Christian. His funeral was held at the church. The pastor asked the family, what kind of person was he? His grandson, Eleanor's son, replied, he was a very kind granddad. Eleanor replied, he was a strict father. And her husband, Julian, said, well, he was a dad who really enjoyed a pint of beer. 3 different answers about the same person, with love for the father seeping through the laughter and tears. Eleanor later said, since my father was also baptized after my mother, I know we will be reunited in heaven one day. I believe that 100%. So even though I'm sad, I've never felt despair. If I weren't a Christian, I think I would have spent my days crying. And she left these words, my mom was a great cook, so I'm sure she's showing off her skills in heaven. I wonder if Dad is playing his beloved accordion. The father who came home with tapes of Egyptian music, the mother who sang offbeat hymns. They are both gone now. But Eleanor can clearly picture them smiling together in heaven. After seeing her parents off, Eleanor did not stand still. The 26th of December, 2004, the Indian Ocean tsunami. Shortly after that day, a letter reached Eleanor. The sender was a relief worker in Sri Lanka. They had lost their sister and brother-in-law in the tsunami, and their orphan niece was still in primary school. The letter writer had taken the 2 children in. The letter said, I want the world to know that there are still so many children orphaned by this disaster. The letter came via a Christian relief agency, for which Eleanor had served as a goodwill ambassador from 2007 to 2010. After reading the letter, Eleanor thought, I may not be able to do anything by myself, but if we all come together, maybe we can do something. And so, Love East was born, an organization to support the survivors. They held concerts and workshops in temporary housing and community centers in the affected regions. It was later formally established as an NPO. Through these activities, Eleanor came up with a new idea. Isn't there something I can do even in places without a piano? Eleanor had long been interested in olive oil. The Bible contains numerous references to anointing with oil, and wanting to understand its deeper meaning, she had become a certified junior sommelier with the British Olive Oil Association. So, she started her own unique event called Bible Cafe, a talk about the Bible while tasting olive oil. It was a format unique to Eleanor, adding aroma and taste to music and words. In April 2018, about 70 people gathered in a community hall for survivors of a major flood in Cornwall. The olive oil lecture was a great success. Tasting and sampling are always fun, aren't they? Eleanor laughed. She also offered some everyday advice. A teaspoon of olive oil on your morning porridge. It's delicious and healthy. And when speaking about her activities, Eleanor always says, we may not be able to do big things, but I want to continue the work of never forgetting, steadily and for a long time, never forgetting. The activities of Love East expanded from tsunami relief to other areas. At 67, she travels the country, singing, talking about olive oil, and continuing to visit disaster-stricken areas. Eleanor's 35 years of silence may have been quiet, but they were never empty. In March 2019, exactly 40 years after the release of The Stranger, Eleanor published a book. The title was Two Strangers, Alara Vance, Eleanor Croft. On the cover, the 2 names were listed side by side. The once conflicting identities of Alara and Eleanor were placed together in one place for the first time. Regarding her motivation for writing the book, Eleanor said, deep down, I always thought that when the time was right, I wanted to reveal what was in my heart. And as she wrote, she had a realization. When I arranged the scattered puzzle pieces of my life in chronological order and looked at them from a distance, I saw that they were all connected. Her debut, the suffering that came with success, her encounter with faith, her retirement, marriage, infertility, childbirth, her mother's death events that seemed disparate when laid out, formed a single path. Her husband, Julian Croft, wrote the afterword. Readers sent in comments like, "There is love here." When I reached the final afterword, I couldn't stop crying. Her travel companion of over 30 years added the final words to his wife's book. On the 18th of August 2021, Eleanor held a one-night-only concert. It was the first time she had stood on stage as Eleanor Vance since the Royal Albert Hall in 1984, a full 37 years later. It was originally scheduled for July 2020, but was postponed twice due to the COVID-19 pandemic, 37 years of silence. In just one night, when that night was over, she would go back to being Eleanor Croft. 6 weeks before this concert, on the 16th of July 2021, Marcus Shaw passed away. He was the producer who had transformed A Pale Dawn into The Stranger. The man who created The Stranger was no longer there. But the song echoed once again on a stage after 37 years. The following year, in 2022, Chris Ryder also passed away at the age of 73 from cancer. He was the man who had encouraged Eleanor, telling her, "You don't need to make music that's consumed like tissue paper." Her mother died in 2012, her father in 2015, and her father-in-law, Arthur Croft, passed away in 2020 at the age of 96. Marcus Shaw in 2021, Chris Ryder in 2022. The people who had been guideposts on her life's journey departed, one by one. But Eleanor says this about herself. "The sense of unease I felt when I was in the entertainment world, I also felt in a different form, even in the world of Christianity. I feel that this sense of being a stranger, always searching for a destination, will continue like a traveler until I return to my heavenly home." She was a stranger in the entertainment world. She was a stranger even in the church. She says she has always had a feeling of not quite fitting in wherever she was. However, she adds, "Of course, because Jesus is with me, it is not a lonely journey." 12 years of infertility, childbirth at 39, her son's rebellion, and a mother who passed away while singing a hymn. Within the 35 years of silence was a life that was quiet but profound. So, the final question, is she happy now? At 67, Eleanor Croft still travels to churches all over the country, continuing to sing. "As long as my fingers can move, I can play and sing. As long as I have a voice, I can speak and sing. I don't know if I can do it for another 10 years, but as long as God allows, I want to continue my activities as a musical missionary." Some days she sings in a small church in front of 10 or 20 people. If requested, she will also sing The Stranger. Some of the songs she sings are the same as those from her former stage life. So what is different? Eleanor answers, "The big difference is who I am singing for. In commercial music, the customer is king. But as a music evangelist, I sing for God. The songs may be the same, but I sing solely to convey a message about God. There's a great responsibility in how I convey it, but I myself am not being judged for who I am or what I think." And she continued, "To be able to pour 100% of my energy into what I want to do, conveying a message about God, I feel very happy and grateful." Very happy and grateful. The woman who, at 21, said she disliked it so much I didn't even feel like singing, now at 67, says she is very happy. She is singing the same song with a completely different feeling. One day, a missionary said to Eleanor, "Eleanor, there are very few things we truly do with our own strength." Eleanor nodded. Of course, she was supported by many people. She understood that. But in her heart, she thought, "But there are plenty of things I am working hard to do myself." The missionary continued, "Even the fact that you wake up in the morning and there is air to breathe, that isn't a given." I was stunned, Eleanor says. I realized, I am being kept alive from that very level. Since then, I try to find many things to say thank you for every day. Eleanor touches on the English phrase "to be born." She notes that this phrase, meaning to come into the world, is in the passive voice. Just as the words suggest, we are not living by our own power alone. We are being kept alive. From I am living to I am being kept alive. This small shift changed Eleanor's daily life. Once, death was the most terrifying thing for Eleanor, something to be avoided, something not to be thought about. But now, she says it's different. Now I think of death as being right next to life. My mother was the picture of health. Then suddenly she was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. You never know what will happen. My mother's death taught me that. Eleanor uses the phrase, "How you live is how you die." The way you live each day determines how you meet your end. That is why she wants to live today with care. And she said, I know it's difficult, but even if I were told I had 3 months to live, I would want to live right up to the very end just as I am living now. I don't think there is a more luxurious life than that. To be able to say, I want to live just as I am now, means that the present is already full enough. There is a Bible verse that Eleanor holds dear. Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances. To rejoice, to pray, and to be thankful. I think this is the secret to human happiness, beyond any religion. However, Eleanor also honestly says, that said, it looks easy, but it's quite hard to put into practice. I sometimes find myself complaining, but it's better for the heart to be as joyful as possible, and if you're going to complain, it's better to pray. And saying thank you gives people energy, not perfect. She complains too, but she knows the direction. That is the 7-year-old Eleanor Croft's current self. Eleanor has spoken about her own funeral. I think a funeral is a place where people come to see the final act of an individual's life. If something happened to me, I'd be happy if we could have a funeral, like a mini live concert or an exhibition, where various artists could express themselves. There are choir singers and gospel singers at the church, so I'm sure everyone would be grabbing the microphone to sing. She said this with a laugh. With a red ribbon on my chest, pink socks, wearing some beautiful color, I'd be happy if they could see me off cheerfully. A person who laughs while talking about their own funeral. These are the words of someone who does not fear death. And they are also the words of someone who is content with their life. When asked what she would want for her last meal, Eleanor replied, a warm cup of tea, toast with butter, and a simple bowl of soup. I've always thought I'd want to have those 3 things: tea, toast, and soup. That was all the million-selling songstress wished for. There is a Bible verse that Eleanor first memorized. Proverbs 16:24. Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Eleanor says, it was the first verse that taught me that words can heal people. In that song, there is one place where the original form remains. A pale dawn passes me by, leaving me behind. This one line still quietly testifies to the fact that a song called A Pale Dawn once existed. Today, the area around Kew Garden Station on the District Line has been built up, and the wasteland where children once played is no longer visible. The scenery seen from the train window that day is lost forever. But the song born from that scenery is still being sung today. Eleanor recently said, I don't think about big things. If I can just calmly, without fuss, continue what I am doing now, I think that is the greatest luxury. Even if every day seems the same and unchanging, the me of yesterday is no longer here today. The fact that there is a today and a new tomorrow will come is a miracle. As long as I am kept alive, to be able to walk each day with care is something to be grateful for. Eleanor Croft continues to sing in small churches today. Beside her, there is always a piano. This time, her music is not arranged by someone else, nor is the title changed. With her own fingers, she plays her own song. Maybe I'm still a stranger even now. Perhaps I'll always be a traveler until I reach somewhere. Perhaps this story will be a chance for you to talk with friends who lived through that era, or a chance to tell it to your children or grandchildren who do not know it. Thank you for reading to the very end.